Jake Morrison walked through the massive halls of the Galactic Council building on Nexus Prime. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that glowed with soft blue light. Everything here was built to make visitors feel small and unimportant. The ceiling stretched so high that Jake could barely see the top. The floor was smooth and cold under his feet. He had been Earth's ambassador to the galaxy for 3 years now. 3 long years of trying to convince 12 different alien races that humans deserved a place in their government. Most days, Jake felt like he was talking to a wall. The aliens looked at humans like they were children playing with dangerous toys. Dr. Lisa Campbell walked beside him, her tablet glowing with notes and data. She was the smartest person Jake had ever met, and she knew more about alien biology than anyone else on Earth. Her brown hair was tied back in a neat bun, and her face showed the same worry that Jake felt in his chest. "The intelligence reports are getting worse," Lisa whispered as they walked. "My sources say the council has already made up their minds. They're going to reject our application today." Jake nodded but kept walking. He had expected this news, but it still hurt to hear it. Earth had been trying to join the Galactic Council for over 20 years. They had sent gifts, shared technology, and even helped solve disputes between alien worlds. Nothing seemed to matter. The main council chamber was ahead of them. Jake could see the 12 seats arranged in a circle, each one designed for a different type of alien body. The Zephyrians floated in chambers filled with glowing gas. The Korthek sat in chairs that looked like metal thrones. The other races had their own strange seats that matched their weird bodies. Hi. Arbiter Vexthal was already in his position at the center of the circle. He was a Korthek, which meant he looked like a giant lizard covered in dark scales. His eyes were yellow and cold, and they never seemed to blink. When he spoke, his voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "Human Morrison," Vexthal said without any greeting. "You have requested final consideration for your species' membership in this council. We have reviewed your application for the..." Last time, Jake stepped forward and bowed slightly. It was a human gesture of respect, but he knew the aliens didn't really understand it. "Thank you, High Arbiter. Earth is ready to take its place among the galactic community." A sound like wind chimes came from the Zephyrian section. Jake had learned that this was how they laughed. It was not a friendly sound. "Your species has existed for barely 200,000 years, said one of the Zephyrians. Their voice was like several people talking at once. "We have maintained peace in this galaxy for over 3 million years. What makes you think you are ready to help us govern?" Jake had prepared for this question. "We may be young, but we learn quickly. In just 50 years, we went from not knowing other life existed to traveling between stars. We've already helped solve the trade dispute between the Morton and the Kellics. We've shared our medical knowledge with 6 different worlds. And you've also fought over 200 wars on your own planet," growled a Korthik general. "Your species kills each other over resources, territory, and ideas. How can we trust you with galactic peace?" "We've moved beyond those conflicts," Jake replied. "Humanity has been united under one government for 30 years. We've learned from our mistakes." But even as he spoke, Jake could see that the aliens weren't listening. Their minds were already made up. The Zephyrians whispered among themselves, in their musical language. The Korthik officers looked bored. The other races seemed to be thinking about anything except what Jake was saying. Dr. Campbell stepped forward. "If I may address the council," she said, "humanity has unique perspectives that could benefit everyone. Our diversity of thought has led to innovations that older species might not consider." High Arbiter Vexthal raised one clawed hand for silence. "Dr. Campbell, your species' chaotic nature is exactly why we cannot accept you. You think differently because you are unpredictable. Unpredictable species are dangerous to galactic stability." Jake felt anger building in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "With respect, High Arbiter, every species was unpredictable once. The Zephyrians were warriors before they became philosophers. The Korthak were nomads before they built their empire. Growth and change are natural." "The decision has been made," Vexthal announced. The chamber fell silent. The Galactic Council hereby rejects the membership application of the species known as humans. Furthermore, we recommend that human expansion be limited to their current territories. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. Not only were they rejecting Earth's membership, but they were also trying to trap humanity in their small corner of space. This was worse than he had feared. "This is not justice," Jake said, his voice getting louder. "You're punishing us for being different. You're afraid that we might actually contribute something new to your ancient systems." "Human Morrison," Vexthel warned, "you will control your tone." But Jake was beyond caring about diplomatic protocol. 3 years of frustration and humiliation came pouring out. "No, I won't control my tone. You've made it clear that you never intended to give us a fair chance. You've wasted our time and insulted our species." The Korthek guards around the chamber began to move forward. They were massive creatures, each one carrying weapons that could kill a human instantly. Jake knew he was in danger, but he couldn't stop himself. "You call us violent and unpredictable," Jake continued, "but you rule this galaxy through fear and intimidation. You've destroyed entire civilizations that didn't match your idea of proper behavior. At least when humans fight, we fight for something we believe in. That is enough." Vexthel roared. "Guards, arrest this human for insubordination against galactic authority." The guards moved quickly. Jake felt strong hands grab his arms and lift him off the ground. He struggled, but it was useless. The Korthak were much stronger than humans. "You're making a mistake," Jake shouted as they dragged him toward the door. "Humanity won't forget this." "We won't forget how you treated us." Dr. Campbell tried to follow, but more guards blocked her path. "Jake," she called out. "I'll contact Earth. I'll tell them what happened." "Tell them everything, Lisa," Jake yelled back. "Tell them how these so-called peacekeepers really operate. Tell them that justice means nothing to the Galactic Council." As the guards pulled him from the chamber, Jake could hear the aliens talking among themselves. They sounded relieved, as if they had just solved a difficult problem. They had no idea what they had just started. The last thing Jake saw before the doors closed was Dr. Campbell's face. She looked scared, but there was something else in her eyes. Something that looked like determination. Jake hoped she would make it back to Earth safely. Someone had to warn humanity about what was coming. The guards dragged him through the crystal corridors toward the detention center. Jake knew that his diplomatic mission was over. He had failed to get Earth into the Council, and now he was probably going to die on this alien world. But as they threw him into a cell, Jake felt a strange sense of peace. He had done his best to solve this problem peacefully. He had followed all the rules and shown all the proper respect. It hadn't mattered. The Galactic Council had never intended to treat humanity as equals. They saw humans as a threat to be contained, not partners to be welcomed. Jake settled onto the cold floor of his cell and waited. He knew that Earth would respond to his capture. The question was how they would respond. Jake hoped it would be swift and decisive. The galaxy needed to learn that humans were not as helpless as they appeared. Dr. Lisa Campbell ran through the back streets of Nexus Prime's diplomatic district. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might burst. The alien city was a maze of tall buildings and strange architecture, but she knew these streets well. After 3 years of living here, she had to get to the human embassy before the Council security forces found her. In her bag was a communication device that could send a message directly to Earth. It was the only way to warn humanity about what had happened to Jake. The embassy was a small building compared to the massive structures that other species owned. Earth was still considered a minor power in galactic politics, so they got minor accommodations. Lisa rushed through the front door and headed straight for the secure communication room. Her hands shook as she activated the quantum transmitter. The device hummed to life, and she began recording her message. "This is Dr. Lisa Campbell reporting. From Nexus Prime, Ambassador Morrison has been arrested by the Galactic Council. They rejected our membership application and charged him with insubordination. I believe they plan to execute him. Earth must respond immediately." She sent the message, and then began gathering all her research files. If the Council was going to eliminate the human diplomatic mission, she wanted to save as much intelligence as possible. Her files contained detailed information about alien military capabilities, political structures, and technological weaknesses. On Earth, the message arrived at the Global Defense Command Center in Colorado. The duty officer, Lieutenant Ben Parker, read the transmission twice before running to find his superior. Within minutes, alarms were ringing throughout the facility. President Helen Carter was in a meeting about trade agreements when her security chief burst into the room. "Madam President, we have an emergency transmission from Nexus Prime. Ambassador Morrison has been arrested and may be executed." The president felt cold fear grip her stomach. Jake Morrison wasn't just Earth's ambassador. He was also her nephew, her sister's son. She had watched him grow up, had seen him become one of Earth's finest diplomats. Now he was in danger, and there was nothing she could do to save him. "Get me the Defense Council," she ordered. "Full emergency session. And contact Admiral Rick Hayes immediately." Within an hour, the most powerful people on Earth were gathered in the Situation Room deep beneath the Capitol building. The room was filled with screens showing star maps, alien fleet positions, and military readiness reports. Admiral Rick Hayes was a tall man with gray hair and cold blue eyes. He had been preparing for this day for 20 years. "Madam President, we have three options. We can attempt a diplomatic rescue, launch a limited military strike, or activate the Prometheus Protocol." Secretary of State Karen Phillips spoke up immediately. "We have to try diplomacy first. If we attack the Council, we'll be at war with the entire galaxy." "The time for diplomacy is over," Admiral Hayes replied. "They've made it clear that they don't respect our rights." Jake Morrison tried diplomacy, and now he's sitting in a cell waiting to die. President Carter looked at the screens around the room. Each one showed the massive fleets of the Galactic Council. Thousands of ships, each one more advanced than anything Earth had built. Or at least that's what the Council believed. "What are the chances of a diplomatic rescue?" she asked. Karen Phillips shook her head. "Almost zero. The Council has already made Jake a symbol of human arrogance. They need to punish him to maintain their authority." Meanwhile, on Nexus Prime, Jake was being prepared for trial. The Korthik guards had moved him to a larger cell that was designed to hold prisoners during legal proceedings. Through the energy bars, he could see other cells holding aliens from various species. All of them looked defeated and hopeless. A Zephyrian judge floated into the cell block. Its body was made of shifting gases contained in a transparent suit. When it spoke, its voice was like several people singing in harmony. "Human Morrison, you have been charged with insubordination against galactic authority, threatening Council stability and representing a plague species. How do you plead?" Jake stood up and faced the judge. "I plead not guilty to all charges. I was defending my species' right to exist and participate in galactic civilization." "Your species has no such right," the judge replied. "Rights are granted by the Council to species that prove themselves worthy. Humans have proven themselves dangerous and unpredictable." The trial was a mockery of justice. Jake was not allowed to call witnesses or present evidence. The charges were read by a Korthik prosecutor who spoke like he was bored by the whole process. The evidence against Jake consisted entirely of recordings of his final speech to the Council. "As you can see," the prosecutor said, "the human clearly threatens the stability of our government. He speaks of fighting and violence. He represents a species that has spent most of its existence at war with itself." Jake was allowed to speak in his own defense, but he knew it wouldn't matter. The outcome had been decided before the trial began. Still, he wanted his words to be recorded for history. "I stand before you as a representative of humanity," he said. "We are not perfect, but we are learning and growing. We have made mistakes, but we have also achieved great things. We have art, music, literature, and science that could enrich the galaxy. We have compassion for other species and a desire to help those in need." The judges listened without emotion. When Jake finished speaking, they deliberated for exactly 3 minutes. The Zephyrian judge floated forward to deliver the verdict. The defendant is found guilty on all charges. The sentence is death by energy blade to be carried out immediately and broadcast across the galaxy as a warning to other species who might challenge council authority. Jake felt his knees go weak, but he forced himself to stand straight. He had always known this might happen. Earth's intelligence services had warned him that the council sometimes executed ambassadors who became inconvenient. Back on Earth, President Carter was watching the trial broadcast with tears in her eyes. The entire Defense Council was gathered around the screens watching as her nephew was sentenced to death. "They're going to kill him," she whispered. Admiral Hayes placed a hand on her shoulder. "Helen, we knew this might happen. Jake knew it too. He volunteered for this mission knowing the risks." "That doesn't make it easier," she replied. "The execution was scheduled for the next day. It would be broadcast live across the galaxy as a demonstration of council power. Jake would be the first human to die at the hands of the galactic government, but the council hoped he would also be the last dot in his cell." Jake was visited by Dr. Campbell one final time. She had been allowed to see him as a courtesy to the human diplomatic mission. "Lisa," he said when she arrived, "did you get the message to Earth?" "Yes," she replied. "They know what happened. President Carter is considering all options." Jake nodded. "Good. Tell me honestly, what do you think Earth will do?" Lisa was quiet for a long moment. "I think they'll activate the Prometheus protocol. Admiral Hayes has been waiting for an excuse to use it for years." "That's what I was hoping you'd say," Jake replied. "The Council thinks they're teaching humanity a lesson. They have no idea what they're really doing." The next morning, Jake was brought to the execution chamber. It was a large room with crystal walls that would broadcast the event to viewers across the galaxy. Thousands of aliens had gathered to watch, and billions more would see it on their communication networks. High Arbiter Vexthal stood at the center of the chamber, holding an energy blade that glowed with deadly light. "Human Morrison, you have been found guilty of crimes against galactic stability. Do you have any final words?" Jake looked directly into the recording devices. He knew that Earth would be watching, and he wanted his message to be clear. "You think you're ending something today, but you're starting something far worse. Humanity doesn't kneel to tyrants, and we don't forget our dead. The galaxy will learn what happens when you murder an innocent man for the crime of asking for justice." The energy blade fell, and Jake Morrison died with Earth's defiance on his lips. President Carter watched the execution from her office, surrounded by her advisors. As the broadcast ended, she wiped the tears from her eyes and turned to Admiral Hayes. "Execute Order Prometheus," she said quietly. "It's time they learned what happens when you corner a human," the Admiral nodded grimly. "Yes, Madam President. The galaxy is about to discover that humanity is not as defenseless as we've pretended to be." Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, General Tom Bradley walked through corridors that most people didn't know existed. The Prometheus complex had been built in secret over 20 years ago, hidden from the world and even from most of Earth's government. Only a handful of people knew what really happened in these underground chambers. The general's footsteps echoed on the metal floors as red lights flashed throughout the facility. After decades of preparation, the moment had finally arrived. His secure communication device buzzed with the message he had been waiting for. "Execute Order Prometheus. Authorization Alpha 77. President Carter's authorization codes were valid. The Annihilation protocol was now active. General Bradley entered the main command center, where hundreds of technicians and military officers were already at their stations. Massive screens covered the walls, showing star maps, alien fleet positions, and weapon systems that the galaxy had never seen before. "All stations report ready, sir," said Colonel Jane Roberts, the facility's operations officer. "The Ghost Fleet is in position. Orbital platforms are charging. Nova weapons are armed and ready." Dr. Amy Stevens stood at the central console, her hands moving across holographic controls. She was the lead scientist for the Prometheus project, and she had spent most of her adult life preparing for this day. Her brown hair was streaked with gray from years of stress, but her eyes were sharp and focused. "General," she said without looking up from her work, All systems are showing green. We can begin the attack sequence at any time. General Bradley nodded and activated the facility's main communication system. His voice was broadcast to secret installations around the world and to hidden ships scattered across the galaxy. This is General Bradley to all Prometheus units. The Galactic Council has executed Ambassador Morrison. The Annihilation Protocol is now active. All units are authorized to engage their targets. Show them what happens when they threaten humanity. The response was immediate. Around the galaxy, ships that had been pretending to be merchant vessels suddenly revealed their true nature. Advanced stealth technology that had kept them hidden for years was deactivated. The Ghost Fleet materialized from nowhere, appearing near major Council military installations. Captain Ben Roberts commanded the lead ship of the Ghost Fleet, a vessel called the Vengeance. For 5 years, he had been posing as a traitor, moving freely through Council space while mapping their defenses. Now he was ready to put that knowledge to use. All weapons online, reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Sarah Mills. Quantum torpedoes loaded. Plasma cannons charged. Target: Korthik military base at Kepler 442. Fire! Captain Roberts ordered. The Vengeance unleashed a barrage of weapons that the Korthik had never seen before. Quantum torpedoes tore through their shields like paper. Plasma cannons melted their armor plating. Within minutes, the base that had housed 10,000 Korthik soldiers was nothing but wreckage floating in space. Similar attacks were happening across the galaxy. The Council had thought they were dealing with a primitive species that barely understood space travel. They were discovering that humanity had been playing a very different game on Nexus Prime. High Arbiter Vexthal was in an emergency meeting with the other Council leaders. Alarm signals were ringing throughout the building as reports came in from across their territory. 17 military bases have been destroyed, reported a Zephyrian intelligence officer. The attacks were coordinated and simultaneous. The humans are using technology we don't understand. Vexthal's clawed hands gripped the arms of his chair. This is impossible. Our intelligence reports show that humans have primitive weapons. And a small fleet. They couldn't mount an attack like this. Sir, said another officer, we're receiving a transmission from Earth. It's addressed to the entire Council. Put it through, Vexthal growled, the main screen filled with the image of President Carter. She was sitting in what appeared to be a simple office, but her eyes were cold and determined. Behind her, military officers moved back and forth, coordinating the attack. Members of the Galactic Council, she began, you executed our ambassador for the crime of asking for equality. You called us primitive, you called us violent. You were half right. The screen changed to show footage of human colonies that the Council had thought were simple farming settlements. The images revealed massive military installations, weapons, factories, and training facilities. Millions of humans in military uniforms were shown preparing for war. For 20 years, we have been preparing for this day, President Carter continued. Every diplomatic mission was also a reconnaissance mission. Every trade agreement included intelligence gathering. Every cultural exchange was an opportunity to position our assets. More footage showed human agents working throughout Council space. Restaurant owners who were actually military officers. Scientists who were mapping alien technology. Diplomats who were secretly identifying targets for destruction. You thought you were dealing with a species that barely understood space travel, the president said. But we've been traveling to your worlds for decades. We've been studying your weaknesses and preparing for war. Back in the Prometheus complex, Dr. Stevens was monitoring the first phase of the attack. Her screens showed the Ghost Fleet striking targets across 12 star systems. The coordination was perfect, with each ship hitting its assigned target at exactly the right moment. Phase 1 is complete, she reported to General Bradley. All primary military targets have been neutralized. Ghost Fleet is moving to Phase 2 positions. Excellent, the General replied. Begin Phase 2. Show them what real firepower looks like. Phase 2 involved Earth's orbital defense platforms, which had been hidden in space for over a decade. The platforms were disguised as asteroids and space debris, but each one contained weapons that could destroy entire fleets. The first platform revealed itself near the Zephyrian homeworld. It had been floating in their system's asteroid belt for 8 years, completely undetected. Now it extended massive weapon arrays and targeted the Zephyrian fleet. The weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had seen. They fired beams of pure energy that could cut through any known material. The Zephyrian ships, which had been considered invincible, were sliced apart like toys. Similar platforms activated throughout Council space. The Korthic Empire's main fleet was destroyed in minutes. The Morton Defense Force never had a chance to return fire. Alien species that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years watched their military might disappear in explosions of light. On Nexus Prime, the Council members were in complete panic. Their communication systems were reporting disasters from every corner of their territory. Fleets that had taken centuries to build were being destroyed in minutes. How is this possible? Demanded one of the Zephyrian leaders. Humans have only been in space for 50 years. They can't have technology this advanced. They've been lying to us, Vexthal realized. Everything they've shown us was fake. Their primitive ships, their simple weapons, their peaceful intentions. It was all a deception. The truth was finally becoming clear. Humanity had never been the weak species they pretended to be. They had been preparing for war while talking about peace. They had been building weapons while offering friendship. They had been positioning themselves for conquest while begging for acceptance. Dr. Stevens activated the communication system in the Prometheus complex. Her voice was broadcast to every council world simultaneously. This is Dr. Amy Stevens, speaking for the people of Earth. You have seen the first 2 phases of our response. Phase 3 begins now. You wanted to teach us about galactic power. Allow us to return the favor. Phase 3 was the deployment of the Nova bombs. These weapons were humanity's ultimate achievement, devices that could cause a star to collapse and destroy entire solar systems. The first target was the Korthic Military Academy at Rigel-7. The bomb was no bigger than a person, but it contained technology that could manipulate stellar physics. When it detonated inside the star, it triggered a cascade reaction that caused the star to collapse into a black hole. The destruction was visible from dozens of light years away. The Rigel system, which had been home to millions of Korthic soldiers, simply vanished. In its place was a growing black hole that would eventually consume everything nearby. The message was clear. Humanity had not just developed advanced weapons. They had created tools that could destroy entire civilizations. The species that the Council had dismissed as primitive had become the most dangerous force in the galaxy. As reports of the Rigel system's destruction reached Nexus Prime, the Council finally understood what they had done. They had executed one human ambassador, and in response, humanity was systematically destroying everything they had built. The galaxy was learning a lesson that humans had known for thousands of years. It's not the size of the dog in the fight that matters, it's the size of the fight in the dog. And humanity had a very big fight indeed. The news of Rigel-7's destruction spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within hours, every species in Council space knew that humans had somehow made an entire star system disappear. Fear replaced the arrogance that had ruled alien thinking. For millions of years, Commander Paul Davis led his squadron toward the Zephyrian homeworld of Ethereal. His ship, the Retribution, moved through space like a ghost, invisible to alien sensors. Behind him followed 20 more vessels, each one carrying enough firepower to level a planet. Target confirmed, reported his weapons officer, Lieutenant Mark Cooper. Zephyrian Defense Fleet is holding position around their homeworld. 57. Ships total. Paul studied the tactical display. The Zephyrian fleet looked impressive, with their elegant ships that glowed like captured starlight. They had been the pride of the galaxy for 3 million years. In about 10 minutes, they would be space debris. Begin the attack, Paul ordered. Remember, we want survivors. They need to spread the word about what happens when you cross humanity. The human ships dropped their stealth fields and opened fire. Their weapons were beyond anything the Zephyrians had imagined. Quantum disruptors tore through alien shields. Plasma beams melted armor that had never been damaged in combat. The beautiful Zephyrian ships began exploding one by one on the other side of the galaxy. Captain Susan Brooks was leading her own attack against the Korthik capital world of Dominion. The massive fortress planet had been considered impregnable for millions of years. Its surface was covered with weapon platforms and shield generators that could stop any attack. Initiating orbital bombardment, Susan announced to her crew. Target all shield generators first, then the weapon platforms. The human ships unleashed a rain of destruction onto the planet below. Energy beams cut through the Korthik defenses like they were made of paper. Explosions lit up the planet's surface as centuries of military construction was destroyed in minutes. In the Prometheus complex on Earth, Dr. Stevens watched the attacks unfold on her screens. Each human ship was equipped with advanced artificial intelligence that could process information faster than any alien computer. The AI systems coordinated the attacks across hundreds of light years, ensuring that every shot hit its target. Phase 4 is beginning ahead of schedule, she reported to General Bradley. Our sleeper agents are activating across Council space. The sleeper agents were humans who had been living undercover in alien societies for years. Some ran businesses. Others worked in government offices. A few had even married aliens and started families. Now they were revealing their true purpose. Agent Chris Miller had been running a restaurant on the Morton homeworld for 12 years. The aliens who ate. They considered him a friend. They had no idea that he was actually a colonel in Earth's intelligence service. His restaurant's basement contained enough explosives to level 6 city blocks. "This is Agent Miller to Prometheus Control," he said into his hidden communicator. "Target confirmed. Morton Government Center is directly above me, ready to execute." Similar reports came in from agents across the galaxy. Earth had planted operatives on dozens of worlds, all waiting for this moment. When the signal came, they began destroying important targets from within on the Kellick's homeworld. Agent Mary Johnson had been working as a computer technician for 8 years. She had used her position to plant viruses in their entire communication network. When she activated the viruses, every Kellick's ship in space lost contact with their command centers. The Torvin species discovered that their weapons factories had been sabotaged by workers they had trusted for years. The Nexari found that their fuel depots were exploding one by one, destroyed by humans who had pretended to be loyal employees, but the most shocking revelation was happening on the Council worlds themselves. Species that had been oppressed by the Council for thousands of years were rising in rebellion. They had been waiting for someone strong enough to challenge the ancient power structure. The Vortani had been enslaved by the Korthak for 2,000 years. When they saw human ships destroying Korthak fleets, they began attacking their oppressors. Millions of Vortani workers abandoned their posts and began fighting for freedom. The Epsilon colonies had been forced to send tribute to the Zephyrians for centuries. When news of the Zephyrian fleet's destruction reached them, they declared independence. Their message was simple: we stand with humanity against tyranny. Even some members of the Council races were switching sides. Younger Korthak who were tired of their empire's brutality began helping human forces. Zephyrian scientists who had always questioned their leaders' methods shared intelligence with Earth on Nexus Prime. High Arbiter Vexville was watching his empire crumble in real time. Reports of defeats and rebellions flooded in every minute. His communication officers could barely keep up with the disaster reports. "Sir," said one of his aides, "we're receiving surrender offers from 17 different sectors. They want to negotiate with the humans." "No negotiations." Vexthal roared. "We are the Galactic Council. We have ruled this galaxy for millions of years. We will not bow to these primitive mammals." But even as he spoke, Vexthal knew that his time was ending. The humans had done something that no species had ever accomplished. They had united the galaxy against the Council. Centuries of resentment and anger were exploding into open rebellion. President Carter's next broadcast reached every communication device in the galaxy. This time, she wasn't just addressing the Council. She was speaking to every living being. In known space. People of the galaxy, she began. For too long you have lived under the boot of an empire that calls itself a council. They have crushed your dreams, stolen your resources, and murdered your children. Today that ends. The broadcast showed footage of human forces liberating alien worlds. Council prisons were being opened, releasing political prisoners who had been locked away for decades. Human medical ships were providing aid to species that the Council had neglected. We are not here to conquer you, President Carter continued. We are here to free you. Join us, and together we will build a galaxy where every species has a voice and every world has a choice. The response was overwhelming. Entire star systems declared their support for humanity. Alien fleets that had served the Council for centuries switched sides and began attacking their former masters. Dr. Stevens watched the strategic map in amazement. Red markers showing Council territory were turning blue as world after world joined the human cause. What had begun as a military operation was becoming a galactic revolution. General, she said to Bradley, at this rate the Council will collapse. Within days. Their authority is evaporating faster than we predicted. Good, the general replied. But we're not finished yet. They still have their core fleets and their main strongholds. Time to show them what a real war looks like. The second wave of Nova bombs was deployed against the Korthic Empire's 3 strongest fortress systems. These were military centers that had never been successfully attacked in the Empire's history. Each system contained millions of soldiers, and thousands of ships. The bombs detonated simultaneously, causing 3 stars to collapse into black holes. The destruction was visible from halfway across the galaxy. 3 entire star systems, representing the heart of Korthic military power, simply ceased to exist. The message was received across the galaxy. Humanity had not just developed advanced weapons. They had become a force of nature, capable of rewriting the very structure of space itself. On the Zephyrian homeworld, the surviving leaders watched in horror as their ancient enemy species cheered the destruction of Council forces. The natural order that had existed for millions of years was being torn apart by a species that had barely learned to leave their own planet. How did we miss this? Asked one of the Zephyrian elders. How did a primitive species become so powerful without us knowing? The answer was becoming clear to everyone. Humanity had never been primitive. They had been patient. While other species had grown comfortable with their power, humans had been learning, planning, and preparing. They had studied their enemies. For decades, while pretending to be harmless. Now, the galaxy was paying the price for underestimating them. The species that had been dismissed as violent children had become the most sophisticated military force in known space. They had turned the Council's own tactics against them, using deception and long-term planning to achieve victory. As the 4th day of the war ended, it was clear that the Galactic Council's 3-million-year reign was finished. The question now was not whether humanity would win, but what they would do with their victory. The galaxy held its breath and waited to see what kind of rulers humans would become. 6 months after Jake Morrison's execution, the galaxy was a very different place. The Galactic Council was gone, destroyed not just by human weapons, but by the rebellion they had sparked across hundreds of worlds. Species that had been enemies for thousands of years were now working together under Earth's leadership. President Helen Carter stood on the observation deck of the new capital station orbiting Earth. Through the massive windows, she could see ships from dozens of different species. Korthic vessels flew alongside Zephyrian craft. Former Council enemies were now partners in building something better. The integration reports are encouraging, said Admiral Rick Hayes, joining her at the window. Most of the former Council territories have requested membership in the Terran hegemony. The few holdouts are mostly uninhabited systems. Helen nodded, but her expression was thoughtful. Victory had come faster than anyone expected, but it had also been more complete than she had hoped. The old Council hadn't just been defeated, it had been utterly destroyed, leaving a power vacuum that only Earth could fill. What about the Council survivors? She asked. High Arbiter Vexel and about 50 other senior officials are hiding in the Outer Rim, the Admiral replied. Our intelligence suggests they're trying to organize some kind of resistance, but they have no support. Most of their own people have abandoned them. The truth was that the former council leaders had become irrelevant. The galaxy had moved beyond them, embracing a new form of government that actually listened to its people. The Terran hegemony was built on principles that the old council had never understood: cooperation instead of domination, negotiation instead. Of force, Commander Paul Davis was now Admiral Davis, in charge of integrating former council military forces into Earth's fleet. His office on Luna Base was filled with alien officers who had once been his enemies. They were now working together to maintain peace across the galaxy. The Zephyrian Third Fleet has completed their retraining, reported Captain Lisa Wong, his chief of staff. They're ready for patrol duty in the Andromeda sector. Pohl reviewed the report on his tablet. The former enemy fleet was now protecting human colonies and alien settlements alike. It was strange how quickly things had changed. 6 months ago, these same ships had been trying to kill humans. Now they were dying to protect them. The integration hadn't been without challenges. Many aliens struggled to understand human ways of doing things. Humans made decisions quickly and expected results even faster. They promoted based on ability rather than age or species. They treated former enemies as potential allies instead of permanent threats. Dr. Amy Stevens had left the military and returned to civilian research. Her new laboratory on Mars was focused on healing rather than destroying. The same quantum technologies that had powered the Nova bombs were now being used to terraform dead worlds and cure diseases that had plagued alien species for centuries. The Vortani homeworld rehabilitation is ahead of schedule, she told her research team during their weekly meeting. We should have the atmosphere restored within 2 years. The Korthek terraforming project is also progressing well. It was ironic that humans were now fixing problems that the Council had created or ignored. The Vortani homeworld had been strip-mined by their Korthek oppressors for 2,000 years. The Korthak homeworld had been poisoned by their own industrial pollution. Human technology was healing both worlds. The new government structure was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Instead of a small group of ancient species making decisions for everyone, the Terran hegemony gave every member world a voice. Representatives from hundreds of species met regularly to discuss problems and solutions. Captain Susan Brooks, now Governor Brooks, was in charge of the former Korthek territories. Her headquarters on Dominion had once been the center of a brutal empire. Now it was the capital of a federation of free worlds where former slaves sat as equals with their former masters. The economic reports are better than expected, she told President Carter during their monthly video conference. Former Korthek colonies are increasing their production now that they're working for themselves instead of the Empire. This was the pattern across the galaxy. When people were allowed to keep the fruits of their labor, they worked harder and produced more. When they had a voice in their government, they cooperated instead of rebelled. The human way of doing things was proving more effective than the Council's ancient methods, but success came with its own problems. Earth was now responsible for the welfare of trillions of beings across thousands of worlds. The military that had been designed to fight a war was now trying to keep the peace. Politicians who had focused on Earth's problems were now dealing with galactic issues. Agent Chris Miller had returned to Earth after his undercover work was finished. He now worked in the Intelligence Services Integration Department, helping former Council agents learn human methods. Many aliens who had served the old government were eager to prove their loyalty to the new one. The Morton Intelligence Network has been completely rebuilt, he reported to his superiors. Their agents are now focused on preventing smuggling and piracy instead of oppressing their own people. The transformation wasn't just political, it was cultural. Species that had been isolated for millions of years were now sharing knowledge and ideas. Human art was becoming popular on alien worlds. Alien music was playing in human homes. Children of different species were learning each other's languages and making friends across the stars. On Nexus Prime, the former council chambers had been converted into a museum. Visitors from across the galaxy came to see the place where the old order had died. The execution chamber where Jake Morrison had been killed was now a memorial to all those who had died fighting tyranny. The inscription on Jake's memorial was simple but powerful. He came in peace and died for truth. His sacrifice lit the fire that freed the galaxy. Every year, representatives from hundreds of species gathered to honor the man whose death had changed everything. President Carter visited the memorial whenever she traveled to Nexus Prime. Standing in the place where her nephew had died, she often wondered if there had been another way. Could they have avoided the war? Could they have found a peaceful solution? "You're thinking about Jake again," Admiral Hayes said, joining her in the memorial chamber during one such visit. "I always think about Jake when I'm here," she replied. "I wonder what he would think of what we've built." "He'd be proud," the Admiral said firmly. "Jake believed in justice and equality. That's exactly what we've created." But Helen wasn't entirely sure. The Terran hegemony was certainly better than the old council, but it was still an empire ruled by humans. Other species had freedoms and rights they'd never had before, but Earth made the final decisions. Humans held the most important positions and controlled the most powerful weapons. "Sometimes I wonder if we've just replaced one tyranny with another," she admitted. "The difference," Admiral Hayes replied, "is that we actually care about the people we govern. The Council saw other species as resources to be used. We see them as partners to be helped." The evidence supported his words. Life expectancy was rising across the galaxy. Poverty was decreasing. Wars between species had almost disappeared. The galaxy was more peaceful and prosperous than it had been in millions of years. In the Outer Rim, High Arbiter Vexthal and his followers were living in exile on a dead world. They still called themselves the legitimate government of the galaxy, but no one was listening. Their own people had abandoned them in favor of human leadership. How did it come to this? Vexthal asked his remaining advisors. How did we lose? Everything to a species that didn't even exist when we were building our first cities. The answer was painful but simple. They had become so focused on maintaining their power that they had forgotten why they had power in the first place. They had ruled through fear instead of leading through example. They had taken instead of given, demanded instead of asked, threatened instead of negotiated. Humans had won not just because they had better weapons, but because they had offered something better. They had given the galaxy hope for a future where everyone could prosper. The Council had only offered more of the same ancient oppression. As the first anniversary of the war approached, President Carter prepared to address the galaxy. Her speech would be broadcast to every world in human space, reaching trillions of beings who now looked to Earth for leadership. 1 year ago, she would say, the galaxy learned that humanity would not be bullied or murdered without consequence. But we also learned something else. We learned that when people are given freedom and opportunity, they will create wonders beyond imagination. The numbers supported her words. Trade was up 300%. Scientific discoveries were happening at an unprecedented rate. Art and culture were flourishing as species shared their unique perspectives with each other. Jake Morrison died believing that all species deserved a chance to participate in galactic civilization. President Carter continued in her speech. Today that dream is reality. We have built something new, something better, something worthy of his sacrifice. As she finished her speech, President Carter looked out at the stars and thought about the future. Humanity had achieved everything they had dreamed of when they first reached for the stars.